This is Trey. Thank you for joining us for another Thursday edition, which, of course, is when we have the pleasure of entertaining your questions, which we're very grateful for. And I mean that. If we didn't have your questions, there would be no need for me and Mary Langston to try to answer them. So please keep them coming. The more, the merrier. And eventually, God willing, I probably won't live long enough to get through all of them, but hopefully Mary Langston will.
We'll be hopeful that we both will be around. Thank you for having me, Trey. How are you?
I'm doing great. I hope you are. Hope you had a good weekend.
Yes, sir. We missed you last week. Do you have any notable sports news for us this week?
Yeah, well, it was a rough Saturday. I came back early from the beach to watch my beloved South Carolina Gamecocks play Georgia. And but you know what I concluded at about 3:30 on Saturday afternoon?
What is that?
That as disappointed as I was. I didn't really think that we would beat Georgia. They're the number one team in the country. They look fantastic. But I did think it would be closer, more competitive. And so I'm sitting there feeling sorry for myself. And it dawns on me, I didn't spend a single day this summer lifting weights, running wind sprints, sitting in team meetings, working on plays. I didn't do any of that. I am not Shane Beamer, the head football coach, Marcus Satterfield, the offensive coordinator, Clayton White, the defensive coordinator. I haven't missed any of like my kids' events. I haven't gotten home at midnight trying to figure out this, that, or the other. So whatever disappointment I may have felt as nothing but a fan pales in comparison to how disappointed the players and the coaches would have been. So, the reality is it was not a great outcome. That's the reality. The other reality is I'm just an observer. The young men that played the game, the guys that coach, the parents of the players, they got to be a whole lot more disappointed. So I got to keep it in perspective. That's what I learned. It's hard because I'm old and I don't have that much else to look forward to other than college football. Those 12 Saturdays that, South Carolina or Baylor or Alabama or any of the teams I'll pull for play. But, I watched Shane Beamer's press conference afterwards. It's his job. It's his life. I don't want to say it's his life. He's a good family man, but so my disappointment really doesn't compare to the disappointment of the players that are sitting there running the stadium steps and, altering their diet and trying to balance going to college with practicing and giving up spring break and giving up Thanksgiving break and all the things they have to do. They're 1,000 times more disappointed than I would be. So I got to keep it in perspective. That's what I learned for the most part. And that Georgia's good. Those two things.
Well, that's a good perspective that we can all have. So I appreciate you sharing that, Trey. And we'll hope for a better game next time. But we have a lot of questions this week, Trey. Are you ready to get started?
I think so. I hope so.
Okay. Well, we're going to start with some sports. And our first question is from Wilbur, all the way from Montana. He writes, BYU did a pretty thorough investigation into the accusation by the Duke volleyball player and found no evidence that the charges were true. Are you going to comment?
Wilbur from the great state of Montana. First of all, your state is beautiful. I never went at all for the first 50-something years of my life, and I've been 3 times in the last probably 4 years, and it's a beautiful state. And I'll say this, Wilbur, your question is exactly the same question my mom asked me at the beach, which is whether the investigation by Brigham Young University had any impact on my analysis. And for those who may not be familiar with what Wilbur is asking, what my mom asked, I think we got maybe a question or maybe, I know we addressed it last week. And if I know myself, and I think I know myself pretty well, I probably gave all the same caveats that I like to give, which is based on what I know now, based on the evidence. I wish I had more evidence. I always wish I had more evidence. So I probably prefaced my remarks in that way. I know what it was. We got a question about Dawn and her decision not to do the home and home with the BYU women's basketball team. That's what it was. But I probably even then said, look, I don't know all the facts. So now Wilbur and my mom have the same question. And the answer is, and always should be, and in my case, always will be, yes, we should always be looking for new facts and new evidence and new witnesses. And Wilbur is correct. BYU looked in to this incident. They took it very seriously. They looked for audio and video, and they interviewed students in the area. I have not read a written report of BYU's investigation. I read the articles about their findings. I don't know that they issued a report. If they did, I want to read that too, because I would welcome the chance to read any report, and especially the witness interviews. And therein lies the key, looking for every piece of evidence, every witness, every audio, every video. I'd be shocked if that's not how I preface my answer last time. And if I didn't preface it that way, that's certainly what was going through my head. So it is always better to wait until we have as much information as possible to draw any conclusions. That's not the world we live in, particularly if you're in the media. What you usually hear in the media is, based on what we know now, or, if this is true, then that is true. And we say that before we figure out whether the if is right. So these are the questions that I have even after reading the articles. So we have the allegation, we have the investigation by BYU, we have a lot of media coverage. Did the BYU investigation include the young woman who first made the allegation? Did the investigation that BYU conducted include teammates and members of the Duke women's volleyball team? Were the BYU players interviewed as well? And what I don't know the answer to any of those questions. Also don't know if BYU asked for permission to talk to the Duke student athletes and had that permission denied. I don't know whether they asked to speak to the Duke student athletes and had the permission granted, but did not conduct the interview. I don't know how specific the allegation was initially in terms of the precise words used and the frequency of those words used. I also think it's worth noting, and I think I made this point to my mom, Duke and the player involved have not recanted the allegations. So there's still an allegation from a witness. BYU did conduct an investigation, which did not turn up what we call corroboration. There was nothing to support the allegation. If this were a courtroom, which is where I am more comfortable and more familiar, the matter would still go to a jury. The jury might well believe the word of the young woman, despite the lack of corroboration found by the subsequent investigation. The jury might conclude that nothing was said and that the young woman was incorrect. And that's why I prefer the courtroom. The question correctly notes that BYU did not find evidence to corroborate.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.